So you have a source sheet in front of you. 49 years ago, on Shabbat Chanukah 1974, a new upstart congregation began its worship here in this historic synagogue building. And that would be our congregation, Beth Am Synagogue. The building was built in 1922, of course. We celebrated our centennial of our building not so long ago. And next year, we've been talking already about the 50th anniversary of the shul. But, pish posh, 50 years. As we'll see at the end, 49 is a much better number. So I want to celebrate our 49th year today. But I want to do so by talking about something maybe a little bit serious, and that is that in 1974, it was really not a given that a new congregation in this neighborhood would survive and thrive as it has. There's been a lot of work getting us to this point, but it's appropriate that that first service happened on Shabbat Chanukah in 1974, because Chanukah is dedication. Also, when we light the Chanukiah, we talk about being ma'alim b'kodesh, that increasing in light and growing. And that's certainly been the story of Beth Am Synagogue, not without its challenges along the way, but I think we can all agree that Beth Am is a wonderful congregation in a strong place with a thriving community in deep relationship with its surrounding neighborhood in central West Baltimore, here in Reservoir Hill. And yet, the last couple months have been an especially challenging time to be in synagogue community, to be a Jew in the world. Questions we might have about how public to be about our Judaism. Should we wear our yarmulke in public or put on a hat in certain context? Are there times when we might be inclined to tuck away a Jewish star? Or perhaps some of us are feeling exactly the opposite, that this is exactly the time to proclaim loudly and proudly our Judaism, to insist that the rising rates of anti-Semitism are not going to define us as Jews. And I feel like in a very real way, that's also the story of this place. When I came in 2010, it was clear that this was a religious building. But I think a lot of people didn't necessarily know much about it as a synagogue. We didn't have a lot of signage outside. There was one little kind of iron plaque that's over on the Utah Place entrance, but you had to almost squint to read it. There wasn't a big sign that said Beth Am. There wasn't a beautiful entrance on Chauncey Avenue. People who knew the story of the building knew this was a shul. Some people knew that it was an active shul, but many people didn't know much about it. And as we moved along through our capital campaign and through the kind of growth and investment in this building and the courtyard, we've been very deliberate about creating signage that identifies this as a synagogue. And in the past couple months, we've been placing posters of those who were taken as hostages as a way of saying, we stand with those who were taken and we pray for their safe return. We have an Israeli flag that's on the building outside. So in addition to proclaiming our values of inclusion and our support of this diverse and majority black neighborhood, we also have been clear about what we stand for as a community, which is a relationship, complicated though it may be, with nearly 1/2 of the world's Jewish population on the other side of the ocean. And so what I want to do is spend a few minutes today looking at some sources that discuss the tension, the kind of inherent tension between being very public in our Judaism, and also are there ways and times that we have to be perhaps less public, and how do we make some of those decisions? There aren't simple answers, but that will lead us into what I hope will be an affirmation that even though next year we'll be celebrating, a nice round number, that really the most important anniversary is the 49th anniversary this year. So here it is from the Mishnah Torah. This is from the Rambam Maimonides, writing in the 12th century, and this is his major law code. Because of this, he says, the sages of that same generation established that these 8 days would begin on the 25th of Kislev, would be days of joy and singing praise, and would light lights on them in the evening at the entrances of their houses every night of the 8 nights to show and reveal the miracle. In Hebrew, leharot ulegalot hanes. And these days are called Chanukah. And on them it is forbidden to eulogize and to fast like the days of Purim. And lighting the lights on them is a commandment from the teachings of the scribes, like the reading of the Megillah. Chanukah is a time of joy, sort of like Purim. We did Hallel earlier today, and Maimonides is going to remind us that one of the ways that we express our joy is by placing the lights at the entrance to our homes, so that people can see them when they walk by. And he further develops this. This is not his original thinking. This is the inherited tradition that comes from the Talmud and other rabbinic sources. It is a mitzvah to place the Chanukah lamp at the outside of one's house within the handbreadth closest to the edge of the entrance, so that the mezuzah will be to the right and the Chanukah lamp to the left. And if he was living in an attic or a second-story apartment, he should place it in the window that's closest to the Reshut HaRabim, to the public domain. One who has placed the Chanukah lamp above 20 cubits has not done anything because it is not recognizable. Right? It's too high up. So you're supposed to put it high, but I guess if you live on the 30th floor, you should put it in the window. But he's just saying if there's a way to have it somewhere where it's really visible, that's preferable. And what is this? What do you think this means, that you would put the Chanukiah on the left and the mezuzah then is on the right? What's the relationship between those two ritual objects, do you think?
It would be reversed, so people would see it the correct way.
Ah, interesting. So maybe it's about how they see the lights of the Chanukiah. Okay. Aha. Oh, because it's on the right as you're walking out of the. Okay. Yeah.
This is probably totally not right, but I sort of feel like either way you looked, whether right or left, there would be a Jewish symbol.
So there's something about these two symbols flanking the door. So when you enter the door, when you leave the door, you've got a Jewish symbol on either side also. The two kind of represent also complementary values, right? Because the mezuzah is the kind of ultimate declaration of a Jewish space, right? It's a way that you proclaim that this is a Jewish household or this is a synagogue. I remember at the beginning, soon after the massacre on October 7th, there were, I don't know if you read, there was like an article about somebody who was creating mezuzot that were like camouflaged. So mostly for European Jewish communities, invented by some, Chabad guy who, for people who felt like they wanted to fulfill the mitzvah of having a mezuzah on their door, but felt unsafe identifying themselves as a Jewish household, that there was still a way to do it. And I read that and I have to say, like, my heart broke reading that. Because the whole purpose of the mezuzah is to be clear that this is a Jewish home and that, you might kiss it on your way in the door. So here we have, but what is the Chanukiah? The Chanukiah is also a proclamation that it's a Jewish home, but it's about not entering the home. It's actually about sort of radiating out from the home, which is why it's in front. So there's a kind of inward-facing mitzvah, and there's an outward-facing mitzvah, and both of them are at the entrance to communicate that this is a Jewish household. And he goes on with the Mishnah Torah, in the next halacha, in a time of danger. So what happens if you are worried and you feel like maybe you can't safely put your Chanukiah in the doorway? A person may place the Ner Chanukah, the Chanukah lamp, the menorah, inside his house. Even if she lit it on her table, it is sufficient. Okay? So if you really can't put it outside safely, you come to that determination, then you can put it outside on the table. But what's the problem with putting it on the table? So the mitzvah of the kindling of the flames of Hanukkah is that they're not meant to be utilitarian. Okay? When we light Shabbos candles, why do we light Shabbos candles? Yeah, it's about bringing in the light and the spirit and all that stuff. But what's the real reason that you light Shabbos candles? So you have light on Shabbos because it's dark, right? Because in a pre-electric world, I mean, I guess there was electricity, but before electricity was harnessed and turned into lamps in our homes, right? If you wanted light, you had to light a lamp in your house. So you would light both as a way of kind of bookmarking Shabbat between the lighting of a lamp or candles at the beginning of Shabbat and the Havdalah candle at the end of Shabbat, but also in a very pragmatic way, so you would have light in your house. But Hanukkah light is not supposed to be about that. You're really not allowed to read by the light of your Chanukiah or, have dinner by the light of your Chanukiah. So if you have to put your Chanukiah on your table, you have to have another lamp burning in the house to provide light. Or maybe you have a fire burning in the stove or in the fireplace. And in that case, you don't have to do it that way. Because the whole purpose of lighting the Hanukkah lamp is Pirsume Nisa, to publicize the miracle. It's not supposed to be utilitarian. It's about expressing our gratitude and our pride in having been saved and having been able to be successful and survive in the 2nd century BCE during the time of Hanukkah. So the Shulchan Aruch, which Rambam's writing in the 12th century, Shulchan Aruch is coming a little bit later in the 16th century, major code of Jewish law that incorporates the Rambam and a couple of other sources into this source. Someone who cannot afford both Hanukkah candles and Shabbat candles, then you might ask the question, right? Those are both important. And you kind of need both of them in order to live an authentic ritual Jewish life. But if you have to choose, if you don't have enough, you should buy a Shabbat candle for the sake of Shlom Bayit, for the sake of peace in the home. Okay? So Shabbat is the ultimate representation of peace. Hanukkah is really not. And if you have to choose between Milchama and Shalom, choose Shalom. Choose peace. But if you have enough money for a Shabbat candle, but not enough for a Hanukkah candle and Kiddush wine, how do you choose between those two? You should buy a Hanukkah candle rather than the wine. Why? Mishum Pirsume Nisa, for the sake of publicizing the miracles. Because the value of being able to shine our light into the street, into the public square, trumps the value of being able to make even Kiddush. Also, you can make Kiddush on other things if you need to, not just on wine. So you can still fulfill the mitzvah. So living at the heart of these sources, I think, is this tension. We're proud to be Jewish. We want to put a mezuzah on our door. We want to put the Chanukiah in our windows. We want to be able to say that it's okay to be a Jew in the world and not to feel unsafe and threatened, God forbid, ashamed of who we are. There's something pragmatic here about also protecting ourselves, right? So if you really feel that your life is threatened, that your safety is threatened, better to protect your life than to protect your pride. I know this has been one of the things that Mark Urschler and the Bitachon Task Force with Alex Pomerantz's participation have been really grappling with, right? How do we feel about being so sort of public as a presence on social media, with signage in our neighborhood, celebrating Hanukkah at our house this year, where we'll have our Latka Hamantash debate. On one hand, we want to be out in the world, as well we should, because we have as much of a right to be here as anybody else, and we're going to continue to do those things. And then we're going to make decisions, hopefully well-informed decisions about how do we also, while doing those things, protect ourselves. And that's, I think, the tension at the heart of this, as we think about Beth Am and its presence now as we celebrate our 49th anniversary. Which brings me to the last text. This text is from the Ramban, not to be confused with the Rambam. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachmanides, who lives in the 13th century. And Ramban, in his foreword to his commentary on Breshit, talks about the importance of the number 49, of course. So on this anniversary, let me offer the Ramban's wisdom. Now our sages have already said, 50 gates of understanding were created in the world, and all were transmitted to Moses with one exception, as it is said, thou hast made him but little lower than the angels, from Psalm 8. So there were 50 gates of understanding, but even Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't access all 50 of them. He could only get to 49. The total number of different gates, as ascertained by tradition, is 50 less 1. It is possible that this 50th gate concerns a knowledge of the Holy One, which is not transmittable to any created being. This number 49, you might already be thinking, is a number that we do talk about a fair amount in Jewish tradition. Where do we hear about it? It's clearly alluded to in the Torah in the counting of the Omer. There are 49 days of the Omer. And in the counting of the Jubilee, the 7 times 7 days of years of Shemitah that then get us to the Yovel, to the Jubilee year. So 49 days to get to Shavuot, 49 years to get to the Yovel, the secrets of which I will disclose when I attain thereto by the will of the Holy One. I love that line. How great is that, right? Thank you, Ramban. Everything that was transmitted to Moses, our teacher, through the 49 gates of understanding was written in the Torah explicitly or by implication in words, in the numerical value of the letters or in the form of the letters. That is, whether written normally or with some change in forms such as bent or crooked letters or other deviations or the tips of the letters and the crownlets, right? The tagin, the crowns that are written by the sofer on the top of the letters, as the sages have said. So what are we talking about here? Ramban is now, in a very clever way, bringing in an earlier tradition, a story from the Gemara, that talks about how actually the very shape of the letters hide this vast array of secrets about what it is to understand Torah, what it is to access the heavenly realm, and that if we read them right, if we understand them right, if we're willing to kind of sit with that mystery, we might attain to those 49 gates of secret, the 50th being inaccessible with the 49. And then he brings this beautiful story, which is like a perfect reminder of what the unfolding Jewish tradition is supposed to be about. And I'll read it in just a moment, but as we think about our 49th years, we think about just what it is to be a congregation in Baltimore in 2023, 2024, struggling to be proud of our Jewish heritage and to celebrate our Judaism in all the ways that we ought to be able to celebrate it. We also think about, what is it that we actually stand for? What are we actually doing here? And I think the story, better than most, encapsulates what it is to be a Jew who has inherited the tradition. Because the story is going to show us that inheriting the tradition and laying claim to the tradition, talking about the Torah that was given to Moses at Sinai, is not about some sort of a static or fixed moment in our history, but is actually as much about the living Torah that we embody and express and add to in our Judaism as it is about a historical moment thousands of years ago. So here's the story. When Moses ascended to heaven, he found the Holy One, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, attaching crownlets to certain letters of the Torah. So imagine this, here's heaven, and who is actually writing the Sefer Torah? God. God's self is there kind of attaching these crowns, okay? So Moses said to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, what are these for? And God responded to Moshe, one man is destined to interpret mountains of law on the basis of these tagin, of these crowns. And whence dost thou know this? How do we know, right? Who is this? It's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva answered them. This is the law that was given to Moses on Mount Sinai. And in the Talmud, the story that's told is actually Moshe Rabbeinu is put into the back of Rabbi Akiva's classroom, right? The Beit Midrash where Rabbi Akiva is talking, and over again, Rabbi Akiva is citing, he's saying, this we learned from Moses at Mount Sinai. And Moses is in the back of the room, and what's Moses doing? He's completely lost, right? He's completely lost by the whole lecture. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And you might think that his ego would then say, oh, well, this guy is completely corrupting the Torah that I gave to the people at Mount Sinai all those thousands of years ago. But no, actually, Moshe Rabbeinu has kind of the opposite reaction, right? He is amazed, he is impressed by this rabbi who's able to take the source material of what he was able to bring into the world and add to it, interpret it, understand it in ways that were increasingly relevant for the community that lived then. For these hints cannot be understood except from mouth to mouth, through an oral tradition which can be traced to Moses, who received it on Sinai. So I want to conclude with Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, who wrote a wonderful book called The Jewish Way. I had the real privilege of studying with Rav Yitz this year, a new book that's coming out of his, and getting to spend some time sitting at his feet. But he writes a chapter on Hanukkah and what it means to be a proud Jew, proclaiming the miracles that we've been privileged to experience into the world through our light, in our windows, God willing, whenever we can possibly do so. Pessimism and assimilationists have more than once informed Jews that there is no more oil left to burn. As long as Hanukkah is studied and remembered, Jews would not surrender to the night. The proper response, as Hanukkah teaches, is not to curse the darkness, but to light a candle. Chag Urim Sameach. May we have a joyous and light-filled Hanukkah this year.
Amen.